Hello lovely people and welcome to this week's video. So today I'm going to be talking about my favourite art supplies when it comes to sketching and drawing. I'm not going to be drawing this intro out too much, so let's jump straight into it. The first thing I'm going to touch on is paper and sketchbooks in general that I particularly like to use. I am not an artist who works mainly in graphite. Whenever I use pencils is to create sketches and preliminary works, so I am not super fussy about the kind of paper I draw on. There are obviously some papers that are more enjoyable than others, but I haven't extensively experimented, so generally I'm pretty happy if I have a pencil and anything that the pencil works on to sketch on, because I'm not too fussed about the kind of paper I use. However, when it comes to sketchbooks, I do have a specific favorite that I like to use to do my sketches in for several reasons. You will have seen that sketchbook in my previous sketchbook tools quite a bit, and my sketch with me, as it is usually the sketchbook I favour when I want to draw, and that is the Rowner graduate sketchbook. There are a lot of reasons why I enjoy this sketchbook, one of the main ones being the paper. It's quite thick, it's 140 GSM, which is 86 pounds I believe in weight. It's acid free obviously, and it's ever so slightly textured, so it's not as smooth as say printer paper, and it has just enough tooth, which is the word for paper texture, to provide just enough resistance to be really enjoyable to draw on with pencil. An added perk of the paper in those sketchbooks is the fact that although it isn't labelled as mixed media, it sustains paint reasonably well. You can't obviously add tons of paint on there, it will buckle, but it can still take a certain amount of watercolour, quite a bit of gouache, and I even painted in oils in those sketchbooks, so I just generally really like them as an all-purpose sketchbook. This video is not sponsored, by the way. I realise I'm saying a lot of positive things about this sketchbook. My video is not sponsored by Rowner. I just really like the sketchbooks. But anyway, the last few things I like about the sketchbooks is the fact that the paper on the cover is thick card, which means that you can also customize the covers quite easily, which I find really nice. The fact that the spine is really thin means you can lay down the sketchbook completely flat. It comes in, as far as I know in the UK, 3 different sizes: A3, A4 and A6. I've used all of them and I like all of them for different purposes, and it only has 20 pages in it, which in my opinion is a really good number because I can easily fill the sketchbook up. It still takes me probably a few weeks, but it means that finishing the sketchbook feels really good. It gives me more energy to start a new one, and I generally feel more productive than if I've been working on a big fat sketchbook for ages and just haven't managed to get to the end. Even if I've produced the same amount of work in both sketchbooks, I'll always feel more productive managing to finish a sketchbook that is thinner rather than managing to fill a few pages in a much bigger sketchbook. It's all psychological basically, but this sketchbook makes me feel more productive. Next, let's talk pencils. So my very favourite pencils to draw with, and it's been the case for about 2 or 3 years now, are the Prismacolor Colerase pencils. They're basically fairly erasable coloured pencils, and for someone like me who has quite a heavy hand a lot of the time, they have a fairly hard lead, which means that even if I press down as hard as I regularly do, I don't put down a really heavy mark on my paper, so it's not that hard to erase. And since these are coloured pencils, the marks that are left over even after erasing are generally less intense than with a proper graphite pencil, so I don't feel like my sketch gets too messy even after I've erased a lot of my marks. I'm also less intimidated by working with colour for some reason. It just doesn't feel as harsh as using a proper graphite pencil, and I also really enjoy mix and matching the colours to draw different elements in my drawings, so these Colerase pencils are absolutely perfect for me. However, I do also enjoy graphite pencils every so often. It's very much a mood thing, and when I do want to draw with a proper graphite pencil, I'll usually pick up one of my Blackwing pencils. I started off with the Blackwing 602, which is still my favourite, but they do have a reasonable range of different hardnesses. They are on the more pricey side when it comes to graphite pencils, so I wouldn't say they are a necessary item if you like to draw with pencils. There are tons of pencils out there that are just a lot cheaper and just as good, but Personally, I just find them really enjoyable. I don't use tons of them, so I like having a really good pencil when I do want to draw with pencil, and this is a brand I really like, but it's definitely more of a luxurious pencil. Something I also use as an alternative to pure graphite pencils like my Blackwing pencils is the Prismacolor Colerase pencil in black. I really like using it every so often to sketch with for the same reasons I mentioned. I like the Prismacolor Colerase pencils in general, but also because the black one has a graphite feel to it, but the result isn't as shiny as a graphite pencil would be. It doesn't go as dark as some graphite pencils can, but it does have that grey quality that I like about normal pencils. It just doesn't end up being quite as reflective. So if I want to take pictures of it for Instagram, for example, I just find that it's not as difficult to photograph. The next thing I want to share with you are my favorite pencil sharpeners. This is a bit of a hazy area for me because I still haven't found my absolute favorite pencil sharpener, and to be honest with you, I have such specific taste in how I like my pencil sharpened that I have tended to use an Xacto knife most of the time lately. It's not a precise science and it looks a little bit dangerous, but it's just what works for me at this time, and I don't have a pencil sharpener that I absolutely adore enough to have it as a favorite. A close contender to my favorite at the moment would be the Blackwing fine point sharpener. It's a two-step sharpener that has two holes, and the first hole whittles down the wood and then the second hole sharpens the point, so it supposedly should sharpen the pencil to a longer, sharper point than traditional sharpeners. However, it still isn't satisfactory in my opinion. I don't like working with a very, very fine point on my pencils. However, I do like my lead to be quite long, so I haven't found a sharpener that fits my personal tastes, so I'll have to do it by hand for now. And finally, the last essential thing I want to mention in my drawing kit are my erasers. My very favorite of all time is the Faber Castell eraser. I'm not entirely sure if it has a specific name to it, but it's a triangular grey eraser and I absolutely love it personally. I know some people out there don't like it. I think everyone's going to have their own opinions about their erasers obviously, but I personally think that it works really well. It doesn't streak. It does make quite a bit of shavings, but they're not tiny and dust like. They do stay quite big chunks which are easy to just brush off. So I personally have always come back to that one, and it's definitely a staple in my kit. Lately I've also been using two of the Tombow Mono Zero eraser pens. I have two in two different sizes. The one I use the most is the pen that uses the 2.5 by 5mm erasers in them, and I also have one that has a 2.3mm eraser in it. Both pens are rechargeable, so you basically buy the pen and then you can buy individual erasers to put in them once you run out of the ones you've been using. So they are pretty useful. I don't use the tiny one very much because it's more of a styling tool. I think it would be the kind of thing that you would use and would be really useful to kind of erase out some highlights in a drawing and that kind of thing. It's not really an eraser that you would use to erase mistakes in my opinion, so I don't have to use it very often, but it's still in this list because I think it's really useful, works really well, and it's just something I always have in my kit just in case. And then finally, I wanted to have a short section of this video to talk about my favorite life drawing supplies, because I do get asked about it quite often, and I do use different implements for life drawing than I do when I just do personal sketches. When I do some life drawing, my aim is different than when I do personal sketches. Personal sketches are about the detail, they're about the narrative, they're about the characters that I'm designing, whereas when I do life drawings, it's all about the pose, it's all about learning about anatomy, and it's all about understanding what makes a pose in general. I am not interested in the tiny details of the hair and skin. I am not interested in the environment. I'm interested in how the human body is holding itself the way it is in front of me and why. Life drawing for me is a general study of the human form, and I need to stay away from my desire to go into detail. So I've put together a small amount of supplies that help me have more dynamic figures, help me not go too much in detail, and also enable me to shade my figures easily and efficiently. The common theme between all of my life drawing supplies is that they are generally quite big and soft leads. So lately I've been using my Derwent drawing pencils quite a lot because, again, as I mentioned with the Prismacolor pencils, I do like working in slightly less harsh colours than pure graphite. So I've been enjoying those a lot because the colours are really earthy. I can go very dark but also quite subtle with them, and the leads are soft and really large, so I can create soft lines as well as dark contrast. I also recently picked up a Koh-I-Noor Hardtmuth Triograph pencil. I think it's a 6B pencil, and honestly I absolutely love it. I do tend to draw with pure graphite a lot more when I do live drawing, just because I don't mind it quite as much for those kinds of studies than I do for my regular sketches, and this pencil has kind of been the ideal pencil for me for my live drawing. The lead is enormous. I do have to sharpen it by hand, but because I don't want my pencils to be very sharpened for live drawing, I don't mind that the tip wears quite quickly because I do like it that way anyway. And then I also like to use a variety of pure graphite leads, usually between 2B and 6B in hardness, just because I like soft pencils, as I said, for live drawing. And when they wear down too much, I have a couple of lead holders so that I can keep drawing to the bitter end with them. And there you go, these are my favourite supplies for drawing and sketching at the moment. Most of these, not all, but most of them have been my favourites for quite a few years now, but I do want to point out that I do realise that some of them are quite niche and some of them are quite expensive for drawing supplies, obviously. So I do want to clarify before I wrap this video up that you don't need high quality or expensive art supplies to have really good sketches. The quality of your art will always depend more on your skill level and your technical knowledge and how much you practice and that kind of thing. However, I do think that having supplies that work for you is very important, whether they be expensive or not, whether they be high quality or not. If you find something that really flows with you, something that you really enjoy using, it will definitely help you bring your art to the next level, because the more you enjoy the tools that you are using, the smoother the creative process will become. And on that note, let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you guys are all really well. Do let me know in the comments if you have tried any of the supplies that I shared in this video, what you thought about them. Also, I'd love to hear what your personal favourite supplies are when it comes to drawing and sketching, and generally I'd quite like to know how your day was and how you're feeling and all that, because I really love hearing from you, and I know I don't reply to everyone, but I do read every single comment and I really appreciate all of you. So I hope that you are all well, take really good care of yourselves, and I'll see you very soon. Bye everyone.